Hello, hello. Welcome back to our afternoon session. Who was able to get something to eat? Yes? Was it good? Yeah? Did you guys have those caramel bites? Did you guys have those little, no? Chocolate? No, because I'm hunting down chocolate. So if anyone spots chocolate in this building, please find me. Okay? All right, well, we have in the first half, if you are just joining the Mona Lisa stage, the polka dot Mona Lisa stage, I'm Nova Lorraine, your MC and host on this stage, and I am a futurist, fashion designer, as well as an author, and I'm building the House of Nova, which is the future of couture. And in the first part of our day, we discussed staking and the future of staking, blockchain as well, and what's happening with ordinals and how that's shaping that space. And we talked about crypto laws and regulations and the fourth industrial revolution. Are our everyday companies going to be our new government? So some really interesting conversations earlier. And we're going to lead into the afternoon with some more dynamic discussions. And we have a wonderful panel, and they'll be talking about ZK proofs, pioneering privacy, efficiency, and transformative applications. And I will be welcoming to the stage Romain Dillet as our moderator from TechCrunch. Welcome. Round of applause, please. We have Kurt Hemecker from MINA. Welcome to the stage. Diego Fernandez, come on up. I feel like I'm on The Price is Right. Come on up from QuarkID. Anthony Day, welcome from Midnight IOHK. And last but not least, we have Martin Derka from Zircuit. And before I leave you, I know these guys are doing an amazing job and you're going to want to have a conversation with them afterwards. I'm just going to ask you if you can take the conversation out into the dim area just so the next panel will be easily heard. All right, I'm going to hand the mic over. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this warm introduction. It's so great to be here in Paris, and I hope more of you are going to come as they wrap up their lunch and join us for this great discussion on ZK and all the use cases, applications that we can find around ZK. So I want to dive directly into the topic. ZK was invented many, many years ago. I'm sure all of you know that. It's been around since 1985, and it has found a sort of new use case. It has been reborn as a much more useful technology recently, due to cryptocurrencies, but also even other use cases around digital identities and other things. But maybe let's start with the recent success of ZK. I'm going to start with you, Kurt. Can you explain why ZK has found this sort of new success in the past few years?
Yeah, thank you, Romain, and thank you to all of you also for being and my esteemed co-panelists. Great to be here with you. So, in a nutshell, ZK, it's really the missing piece that's going to bring blockchain to mainstream users and enterprises. Initially found great utility for scalability, addressing issues with congestion and high costs for Ethereum, but it can do so much more than that. A lot of us are familiar with a lot of the use cases around selective disclosure and privacy, but there's a more fundamental aspect of blockchain compute that ZK addresses. So for example, instead of having to re-execute every single transaction to rely on the security, privacy of a blockchain, you can have that contained in one single proof, which is an amazing economy of scale. And now adding programmability on top of that, which there are many layer 2s in projects and also layer 1s like MINA working on that. So I'll pause there. I could go on for easily an hour, but we can open this up for discussion.
Yeah, let's talk about L2 and Zircuit. I wanted to ask you, Martin. Most people still associate ZK and zero-knowledge proof with scaling blockchains. we touched a bit on that. Why is it much more efficient than traditional, securing methods?
Absolutely. So the reason why we use ZK for scaling blockchains is its succinctness. So Kurt already touched on that. If you are a participant in a blockchain network or user, you can or you will want to at some point verify yourself that the blockchain is actually doing what it is promising you to do, right? And you can do it in two ways. You can either take a look at the inputs and make sure that the outputs of the blockchain, the state roots, are actually correct. Or you can accept that there is some mathematical theory behind that allows you to provide a very succinct argument that the state transition of the blockchain has been computed correctly, right? So in such a case, you only have a very short amount of computation to do, or small amount of computation to do, and you can verify that this argument actually holds, so that the state transfer was actually computed well. And that in the end results in scaling, right? Because you remove the necessity of transferring huge amounts of data throughout the blockchain. You remove the necessity of re-executing the same computations on all the possible nodes that are scaling with the amount of traffic that you have on your network, and you replace it with that small amount of computation that you can do for yourself to convince yourself that everything is fine.
Great. So that's a very crypto-centric view of ZK. But I wanted to ask Diego what sort of new use cases you found in your role, and can you explain your role and your recent projects?
Well, I'm the Secretary of Innovation of the City of Buenos Aires, and a problem that we as a humanity have today is dealing in the digital world with our identity. Our identity at the end of the day is something physical, a piece of card or paper, wallet or whatever. And when we go into the digital world, that becomes very, very inefficient. And we started developing something like 2 years ago, QuarkID. QuarkID is a self-sovereign identity protocol. And we will be, although it's already operational, we'll be launching full scale to the 1 million enrolled users that we have in the city this August. And ZK technology has a crucial role in that. And I will mention specifically two. The first one is selective disclosure. We are in this world completely used to spread our data around, and that is really dangerous. For example, if my daughter goes to a bar and needs to prove that she's over 18, she shows her ID, and in that act, she's giving out her address, her date of birth, and whatever, and that is not necessary. We use ZK technology, and specifically ZK Sync technology, in order to do selective disclosures of different aspects of your identity. And another very interesting case is that we are mounting the protocol over Hyperchain, and Hyperchain uses, which is a part of the ZK suite technology, and Hyperchain allows us to implement the right of forgiveness. When we deal with identity, blockchain sometimes is not what we want, because, for example, we do, as individuals, we do need to have the right of identity, and that within Europe is legislated. And if, for example, we use IPFS or Filecoin or whatever blockchain storage system, we can delete the data, and we need to do that. And ZK comes into play there because we can store the data outside of the blockchain and just store the proof. And eventually, if some user needs to execute this right of forgiveness, we keep the proof in the blockchain, but we delete the data, and that's it. So those are the main two uses that we are using in the QuarkID self-sovereign identity protocol.
Excellent. And Anthony, I wanted to ask you, because many people associate ZK with Ethereum, the Ethereum blockchain. You have a different approach with Midnight and a close relationship with Cardano, for instance. Why is that, and why is it a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth just a brief history lesson just in terms of kind of where we've got to with zero-knowledge technologies, because what you've seen in the last couple of years is the early stage or the lowest hanging fruit use cases coming first, so scalability. You take a few years before that, every blockchain in the world was saying we are fast, green, and secure. Right? We're an Ethereum competitor, we have sharding, we have scalability, and then they get to the realization that actually they don't. And so they do need some sense of modularity. And so you end up with layer 2 solutions coming in, and that becomes particularly powerful. We haven't even got to the point where people are saying, well, actually, we want computational privacy on top of those chains, because those in Web 3 haven't realized it's important. And those in Web 2 had dismissed Web 3 until we're able to actually deliver something meaningful. And so all of the use cases, I was starting work with blockchain only 2016, 17, so not a very long time. But even in that time, we were having the conversation of, well, Ethereum is a public blockchain, lots of scalability, open innovation ecosystem, shared security, lots of really good things. And enterprises were looking at that saying, that sounds really exciting. However, I don't want all of my business logic or all of my transactions to be on-chain for everybody to see all of the time. And we still haven't solved that. The requirements from enterprises, haven't banks, and anybody who is going to be responsible for mass adoption of decentralized technology is still staying away, because we haven't yet addressed the ability to provide selective disclosure, privacy of transactions as part of the Web3 stack that we're offering the world. It's just that they haven't opted in yet. And so amusingly or interestingly, now we're at that moment where MINA, others offering smart contracts, zero knowledge on top of scalability, could consider themselves as layer 1s or layer 2s. And so it doesn't matter whether you're from the Cardano ecosystem, from the Ethereum ecosystem. We've got to a point where there are bridges and options where you don't have to be partisan about it. You do, though, need to think of it in a modular way, right? So we think about settlement layers as being highly secure, large number of validators, very expensive to hack. So at the settlement level, having traditional blockchains that we already know and love is a very good thing, because those ecosystems are very, very large, very expansive, and very difficult to hack. But in parallel with those ecosystems, we can start building parts of the business logic or parts of the application stack from different ecosystems. So it could be a layer 2 for scalability. It could be a roll-up to reduce the weight of transactions, or it could be something like Midnight or MINA to enable you to do smart contract business logic for KYC or identity, or for just making sure that the intellectual property remains only on the hard drive of the people starting a transaction. Those requirements have always been there, but we just haven't realized that they were important until now. And this is why I think ZK is the unlock moment for the rest of Web3.
Do you share this view? Because it sounds like he's been talking to you as well and saying we have this privacy-centric approach, and it's important to focus on that for the years to come.
It's hard not to agree with somebody like Anthony. I know maybe it makes a less interesting panel unless we find something we violently disagree on and can discuss, but no, to his point, I mean, privacy, right? It's a fundamental human right. We all want it in our personal and also professional lives. If you look at, one of the laws that was just passed in Germany around bank payments, you can't do cash for anything over 3,000 euros. Like, that's nuts. So, as we move into a world where cash is being replaced, I mean, you still want privacy for your transactions. Not that necessarily you have anything to hide, but that's a lot of data to be gathered on folks. However, it is the job of governments, regulators, to help protect their citizens. So that's why we have this balance between AML, KYC, and I'm sorry for the Web3 orthodox fanatic groups here. Like, the world of just complete anonymity, just nothing's going to scale like that. And the space that we're all in, and super interesting what Diego has done in Buenos Aires, is using the technology of zero knowledge to help meet the kind of the compliancy requirements that can help it scale in a responsible way. And that comes down to collectively educating regulators, policymakers, governments, how this technology can be used.
And Diego, when you started working on QuarkID, did you have to educate other policymakers around your ideas of using ZK and ZK Sync for the digital identity technology?
Yes, we did. But in my view, of course, this is a crypto congress, but we will have mass adoption when users actually don't know the technology that they're using. Nobody knows outside of these technology events how email works or how instant messages work. Our idea in Buenos Aires is, of course, we educate policymakers, not on technology, but on the governance aspects. And our goal in August is just to upgrade our current Web 2 centralized application, putting in this technology without announcing it to anyone. How will users realize that they are using this type of technology? Because of use cases. When they finally are able of presenting a proof, they won't know if we're using CK technology, CK Sync, MINA, whatever. They just will say, hey, this is wonderful. I can just scan a QR code and I accept the credential and I can prove that I'm here. And our goal is for them not to know what's happening. Of course, I mean, the protocol is open source, it's in GitHub, it's included as a digital public good. All the information is public and everyone can consult it. But 99.9% of users don't care about it. They just care about the use case, and that's our focus.
And do you have other examples around the world of countries or cities where they try to apply ZK to digital identity?
Well, QuarkID today is being implemented in Buenos Aires, in Salta, and we're in conversations with three other different provinces in Argentina. We are doing pilots in Uruguay, in Bogota, in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Bogota, Colombia, Monterrey and Nuevo León in Mexico. We're also in conversations with people from Gibraltar because of the protocol being open source, and so anybody can use it for free. And today, around the world, we have the DIAC in Canada, we have the ADAS here in Europe, which is mandatory since 2026, I guess. Sync Pass in Singapore and DID Alliance in South Korea. Self-sovereign identity is taking the world by storm. I think that the main difference, the main decision that we made, opposed to what the other governments and unions are doing around the world, is that we decided to top ourselves on top of a public blockchain, a non-permission public blockchain. And that is, I mean, in Europe, we're using Hyperledger, I think, and it's permissioned, and in my humble perspective, permission blockchains are kind of an oxymoron. If we want really to build ecosystems, we need to do that on public non-permission blockchains. Otherwise, it's kind of a big database, most costly at the end.
And there was a really good reason for that, right? Is because those who understood the idea of decentralization when they were trying to build such identity solutions or supply chain solutions or whatever else said, yes, we want it to be decentralized. Yes, we'd love it to be not controlled by any one individual, but we don't want a public blockchain in the way they're configured today. We don't have privacy, or we can't keep secrets. And so the only alternative at that time was Hyperledger. Now, thank God, we have an alternative. This is the moment where all of that latent demand, all of that unmet needs, all of the people in 2018 who said, that sounds like a really good idea. I understand the business case completely. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to use crypto. And no, we don't want to have everything on chain. Okay, we'll just do the Diet Coke version, and we'll do it with Hyperledger. All of those people are still there. All of those requirements are still true. It's just they didn't have an alternative until now.
Well, what you're using is the W3C standards for DID and BCs. And the great thing about that standard, the first thing is it's a standard. So everybody in the world is using it. And the second great thing is that the only information that you store on chain, it's your DID, which is an empty container. All of your verified credentials are in your wallet. They're completely off chain. And I am completely convinced that personal information should never, ever be on chain. Never, ever. We can put a zero knowledge proof, whatever, but we never put personal information on chain.
Excellent. Let's talk about Zircuit for a minute. Backstage, we were saying that you're about to launch the mainnet next month in July. How is Zircuit innovating, especially in ZK rollup technologies?
So Zircuit is innovating in ZK technology pretty much exactly the same way how every other rollup innovates in ZK technology. So what we need to know about ZK in this particular setting is that computing zero-knowledge proofs for pretty much anything is a very, very difficult task. It's computationally intensive task. So for problems such as proving that you have executed your Ethereum virtual machine transition correctly. You will be using machines that require 400, 500 gigabytes of RAM and very expensive graphics cards in the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars per card, right? And that is not very easily accessible for the rollup operator. It is also substantial cost that adds up to the paychecks that they have to pay to the infrastructure providers. So one of the major innovations that Zircuit is working on is making this particular situation a little bit easier. So we have specialized proving strategy where we first provide proofs for multiple small claims that are actually substantially simpler to prove, and then we later aggregate them, because that's a beautiful thing about zero-knowledge proofs. In a zero-knowledge proof, you essentially have three participants, right? You have the party that wants to show something to somebody. Then you have the prover that actually produces some computation, produces the zero-knowledge proof that justifies that the prover has seen some data and that this data was valid according to some criteria. And then you have that final party, and that's the verifier, right? And that verifier verifies that the proof is valid. Now, you can actually chain that. So you can obtain proofs for some simple claims, but then you can have another prover that says, hey, I have seen proofs for these particular claims, and here is a single proof that I have seen multiple proofs, right? And you can essentially build this reduction pyramid that at the end provides you with a single proof that encompasses a lot of knowledge and a lot of data that was actually provided as the input at the beginning. So this is one of the innovations that we are bringing. Overall, Zircuit actually has a little bit different mission. So while we are focusing on scaling, we are also heavily focusing on security. So what Zircuit does is that with every single transaction that is sent to the blockchain, we employ some artificial intelligence that vets this transaction and checks the effects. And it assesses whether the transaction is a hack, whether it's an exploit that is there to drain your favorite lending protocol. And if we see that this is the case, we actually do not include that transaction into the blockchain. We put it into something that we call quarantine, and it is totally possible that this malicious transaction is actually never going to be executed.
Great. And how easy it is to switch from one ZK rollup technology to another? Because, as you said, there are other alternatives. So is there a switching cost?
There is definitely a switching cost. The cost is both on the side of the development and it's on the side of the risk as well, right? I think that it doesn't require too much convincing to say that zero-knowledge technology is pretty difficult. There is a lot of algebra, there is a lot of cryptography under the hood, right? You have various ZK and commitment schemes that allow you to generate these proofs, and the proofs have different qualities. They differ in sizes, they differ in the amount of computation that it actually takes to produce these proofs, they differ in the amount of computation that it requires to verify the validity of these proofs, right? Once you have your one commitment scheme or one ZK protocol that essentially works for you, if you decide that you want to use a different one, you have a lot of technology that you actually have to replace. In the first place, you will have to replace the software that generates the zero-knowledge proofs, right? Since your zero-knowledge proofs will look differently, you will actually also have to employ a different smart contract or different verifier entity, right? So in some sense, when it comes to zero-knowledge rollups and on-chain applications, every switch in the cryptography in these ZK schemes actually requires something that is almost equivalent to a hard fork. So it's not easy, and it carries some risk.
It's not an all bad news story. I don't want to be as, guys, please stay here. It's not as bad as you think. ZK is going through its own interoperability movement in the same way. So you have shared sequences in the same way you have bridging that was present in between layer ones, right? And we took how many years to get, I don't know if we necessarily would say we've got really great bridges between different protocols today, but we have very many bridging options. Many are trust minimized, and it's not a terrible place to be. I think the next evolution of ZK will start incorporating the ability to have compatible proving schemes, compatible verification, compatible curves, shared hardware, if that's possible. You sacrifice some privacy whenever you start using third-party hardware. You start sacrificing some security when you start using MPC. But that's probably the next generation of ZK. But for the time being, you're not completely locked in all the time. But do think carefully about your architecture if it doesn't feel modular at the start.
But talking about fragmentation, who is going to build these sort of standards and shared, proofs and shared technology?
It grows in exactly the same way as the rest of Web3 has. It's all on incentives, right? So as part of a ZK transaction, you're going to have a reward, a fee. And so parts of that ecosystem will be sharing the fee with the sequencer, or sharing the fee with the hardware provider, or sharing the fee with the MPC. The more value that goes through ZK transactions, the more fees there are available to third parties. The alternative is you go through Treasury. And so some of these larger projects, those who have grown and have larger treasuries, can fund some of this research. The Ethereum Foundation is spending a lot of money on ZK research. Those who know that it's a critical part of their scaling story will invest behind some of these things, but that's not sustainable if it cannot be part of the core economics.
Okay, nice. And Kurt, because it's a bit fragmented right now, how does it feel when it comes to recruiting talent and making sure that you have developers who are crypto aware and can actually work in the ZK ecosystem?
Yeah, great question, Romain. It's a highly competitive space, right? Not just for ZK, but Web3 in general. Finding good developers in a lot of the projects that we're competing for is that, is competing for that mind share. And one of the ways of making that easy is, and it gets back to the choice of which tools and things people are going to build on. But for example, MINA, and I know Midnight as well, have chosen to have tools developed on top of TypeScript, which is, many people here know, is one of the most commonly used Web 2 programming languages. So, one part is making it easier for developers to actually learn and deploy logic built on ZK, but also abstracting some of the more complex aspects of the applied mathematics that go beneath it for building circuits, which can be quite complex. And I think also to Anthony's point, right, like to become sustainable, there's got to be a tokenomics model that works across the ecosystem in order to get that sustainability built out.
And Diego, now that you are about to see the general adoption of digital identity ZK-based, do you see other potential use cases, maybe for elections, online voting, things like that?
No. That's far away. I mean, it's completely possible. It's completely possible using ZK technology, but I think that's far away. We are evaluating in this moment doing a pilot project with quadratic voting just in a small area of the city for the citizens to decide where the government should put its money. So we're planning this pilot project, giving 32 votes to each citizen. It's not yet defined, but I think that type of applications in non-crucial thing as electing your next president, your next mayor or whatsoever, I think that may become in the future, but I don't think that society today is prepared to vote in this way. That would be, in my humble perspective, perhaps the last thing that we should tackle. There are many, many more things before.
I actually disagree with that. I think it's happening quicker. We're working with a project called Punk Poll, which is based in South Korea, and they recently ran a governmental vote for the for the mayor of Seoul through blockchain. And
to be honest, I'm speaking in Argentina. Perhaps you people don't know, but governments have not been doing a very good job in the last couple of decades. Our economy is awful, and people don't trust the government. So perhaps in Seoul or whatever, people do trust the government much more. In Argentina, if we do with any type of technology, digital elections, people will think that they will be rigged, and that is kind of complex. I mean, we had an electronic vote, but it was a physical vote. You need to go to the ballot station, put a machine and whatsoever. Doing all digital by a phone, in my country at least, it seems kind of far away.
But that's exactly why I think it'll happen quicker, is because of the growing distrust in centralized organizations and the fact that you can run votes that are more transparent, but also protecting the security, the privacy of the voters, as well as the eligibility and the validity of those votes.
I hope that's become reality sometime. And the idea of doing this quadratic voting pilot project is precisely starting to sort of move society in that direction.
So someone will still have to check the verification algorithm, so there will be some, collective overlook of this sort of...
And many people know, too, there's a European digital identity project that's happening as well, too, and a lot of moving parts related to it.
Yeah.
There's an education process in the validators as well here, right? Because people who are looking at saying, I need to communicate to voters that this technology is safe and secure. Okay, it's on a blockchain. Okay, what does that mean? That's the initial reaction most of the time. But then you get past that and say, no, okay, we're prepared to explore it. This is technology that the government cannot corrupt. Okay, interesting. What technology have you used? Name the blockchain. How many validators does that particular network have? What is the finality? What is the level of security in the blockchain that you're including? There's a whole bunch of why this is great technology stories that we inherently know as people working in the industry. But you then have to convince a government stakeholder and then a third-party auditor of government systems that you have chosen an appropriate technology stack and that it is secure enough and it is decentralized enough and it is easy enough to audit such that it's trustworthy. And then you have zero-knowledge circuits, which there is a relatively small number of people in the world who can look at a circuit and say, that's well-written, there's no bugs in that. That's a potential challenge. I think if anyone's looking for a new career, or auditing of ZK systems, or auditing
of my website.
that's I think, if you can get the people who are responsible for communicating, who are not Web3 technologists, to present a rational argument for the technology setup, then we're good. How many people ever explain to you guys the security of a ballot box? Well, I go in with a pencil, and there's a piece of paper, and I put it in some random cardboard box at the end, and suddenly a president is voted. That sounds like a terrible idea. Why are we doing this?
Well, the ballot system is, of course, I don't know, it's not even 20th century, it's 19th century technology. It's crazy. In my perspective, the third thing that's going to happen is that we will be able of sort of promoting digital votes. When we think of our identity today, we imagine an ID, a physical piece of plastic. And when we think of passports, we imagine our book, which we show everywhere. When that changes, and when we think of digital ID of our ID, of our passport, as an attestation within a zero-knowledge technology, and when people start thinking about identities in that manner, then perhaps electronic voting using ZK technology will be much more easy to implement.
Yeah, sounds like a complicated challenge that is going to take years and years of questions and answers before we land somewhere.
But I think here Europe has done a great deal of improvement there with the ADAS. I mean, moving forward in that direction has sort of turned a lighthouse in the world towards digital identity. Canada followed, US is following, and I think that's great.
Yeah, for sure. So
I'm going to disagree with you on one thing, because I think the technology is ready for prime time and is being used now, as has been demonstrated. I think depending on which use cases we talk about the adoption in, digital assets in Web3 today being used, ready for prime time, is prime time. We are good.
For sure, for this part, sure, I agree with you, yeah.
But the wider picture of being able to see verified, trusted, understood by Web2 users,
that's the tricky part.
Government voting systems, those will be further on the adoption curve. But I think it's probably not fair for the audience to leave with the idea that ZK technology is not ready for prime time in the short term.
I'm not saying for everything, just, for when you put the voting system behind ZK, then you have a lot of explanation to do and things like that. So
For public and government voting, yes. For DAO voting, no.
I mean, in corporate use cases, I'm sure there's some voting happening in companies as well. ZK could be adopted quite rapidly, for instance.
I want to quickly react here. When we talk about voting and voting at the state and government level, we are talking about very high stakes, right? But ZK has the potential to actually operate in settings that are much more individually focused. And as one of the examples, I would sort of give the medical field, right? I'm from Canada. In Canada, we have electronic medical records. But if you want to transfer your medical records from one doctor's office to another doctor's office, you would be surprised, it goes through a fax. Who here has a fax at
I thought it would be a DVD or
fax.
USB.
That can be true.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It goes through
So
fax.
fax is unencrypted, right?
Fax is unencrypted,
Okay.
and it's best effort service. It's unreliable. You never know what is going to show up on the other end, right? Now, when we put zero knowledge into this, zero knowledge actually allows me to prove validity of any kind of claims that I have, right? So in the zero knowledge setting, I would be able to carry my own medical records around, and I would be able to certify to any kind of medical office that these records are valid, that I didn't write down that right now I need a little bit more oxy because I just wanted to, right? So
It's the weekend.
sounds like.
All right, thank you. Maybe we have time for one or two questions from the audience. If someone has a question they want to ask. You at the front, yeah?
Thanks. This question for Anthony. You said it's hard to audit ZK circuits. I've been there, I believe you. What would you accept as an alternative? A PDF that I could fake that says, yeah, this is good? Or
No.
What are you looking for?
A good point to kind of re-amplify. It's not that we replace ZK circuits at all. It's that we need to increase the body of knowledge and experience around doing it. So we must get to a point where it is possible for third parties to look at an application, the open source code or the circuit, and say, there are no bugs in that circuit. And the body of knowledge around doing that at this point in time is not as advanced as it is in auditing Solidity code, for example. We need to get there, and there will be bounties. And again, for people looking for a new job, there will be very many roles for people who will be providing or who will be able to provide that service and help the rest of the world get up to speed with auditing ZK.
All right. Another question? There's someone at the back over there. If I could get some help. Thank you.
Hi, I'm in the compliance field, and of course, dealing with KYC and AML matters all day.
Thank you for the hard work that you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you. It's a lot of work that should be made simpler, but I guess that, CK proofs have, amazing potential for the area of AML and KYC. Which interesting experiments are you seeing in this area, and how close do you think we be to convincing regulators that this is just as good as uploading IDs and utility bills?
I'm happy to go in on this one just for a second. In 2017, I was part of a Deloitte team that was looking at a shared KYC utility between asset services in Ireland. Many will be familiar with the concept. At that time, the regulator was interested, but the participants in the market said, no, our KYC is the gold standard, and it is a service differentiator for our bank. How many of you guys have ever chosen your bank for how delighted you were with the KYC process during onboarding? Put your hands up. Yeah, I thought so.
0.
Part one is market dynamics. Part two then is probably the challenge we had with that same entity was who gets sued when something goes wrong is a challenge. So regulators like to have legal entities that they can sue. When something's decentralized, do you sue everybody? Do you create an insurance pot for all of the above? It's challenging. The third thing is liability. So in those kind of models, if you're sharing KYC records between parties, you're trusting that somebody else has done their due diligence or done their KYC appropriately, which, if it's found to not be the case, for whatever reason, JP Morgan accepts a KYC record from Bank of New York Mellon and it was found to be fraudulent, you've now got a problem within the system and you've got a trust issue. And the banks at that point in time weren't prepared to trust a third party such that they could do that. The blockchain facilitates this incredibly well, and the ZK provides exceptional privacy on top of it. But the banks still hate each other, and they still don't necessarily know how to compete yet. And so we've got some market challenges above and beyond the technology. But I believe it's ready and feasible today.
All right, do you want to add something?
Yeah, that was very well description of all the different challenges there, but there are proofs of concept and trials being done today. I'm not so familiar on some of the other technologies, but on MINA there is companies that have done privacy preserving compliant payment systems that kick off KYC AML. And I think it comes down to having like a pool of recognized KYC credential providers that then get wrapped up into attestations that can be used on chain and addressing some of the issues around who's liable and not. But recently I went through KYC for my company, and we went through I wanted to open up several different types of accounts with the same bank. I had to go through 5 different KYC. It's the same company. I mean, it's just crazy.
It's not a great experience. Let's end on this note. Thank you so much for coming for this panel. You've been a great audience. Thank you, Kurt, Diego, Anthony, Martin. Thank you for this panel, and stick around for the next one.
Well, can we do a picture? Yeah. Come on, guys. Just to prove, if we don't get the selfie, it didn't happen. You in? Everybody in? Kurt, can you sneak in the back? We got everyone?